Imagine this. You're lying awake in the dead of night. And your mind is holding you hostage. The room is silent. But inside your head a deafening storm rages. Every mistake you've ever made. Every uncertainty about tomorrow. Every whisper of self-doubt howls in that inner tempest. Overthinking has wrapped its cold fingers around your life, refusing to let go. In the darkness, your heart pounds as if trying to outrun the racing thoughts. But there's nowhere to hide, you are face to face with the chaos you've created in your own mind. Most people never see these battles, fought behind quiet eyes and polite smiles. Today, perhaps more than ever, countless souls are trapped this way, prisoners of an invisible enemy that wears their own face. Anxiety and overanalysis become constant companions, turning hope into dread and peace into a distant memory. You can almost feel the weight of every unspoken fear pressing on your chest. It's as if some part of you believes that by worrying enough, you might prevent the next disaster, yet deep down you suspect the truth. The real disaster is how much life you lose to these worries. In this private midnight war, something has to change, or the spirit will break under the strain. But then, a quiet truth emerges, not in the form of some grand revelation, but as a whisper from a place far older than your fear. The Stoics knew this terrain well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind is its own place, a citadel that no invader can breach unless you open the gates. Yet most people have flung those gates wide for the enemy within, letting every what if and why me march straight into the heart. In the language of psychology, overthinking is not merely thought, it is a feedback loop of the ego's need for control. It is shadow work left undone, fragments of the self you've disowned, clawing for attention in the dead of night. You may think you're analyzing reality, but in truth, you are rehearsing pain, projecting ghosts of the past into a future that has not yet happened. Stoicism does not tell you to stop thinking, it teaches you to think rightly. It demands that you separate what is within your power from what is not, and to surrender the latter without resentment. When you begin to live by this law, the mind starts to unclench. That grip, so desperate to hold the world in place, loosens. You begin to see that the storm was never the world, it was you, wrestling yourself. And here, something stirs. The possibility of freedom. Freedom, the Stoics taught, is not the absence of chains, it is the understanding that most chains were illusions all along. Epictetus, born a slave, knew this better than most. He reminded his students that no one can enslave the mind unless it consents. And yet, how many live as voluntary captives, shackled to imagined catastrophes, shackled to words never spoken, shackled to an endless trial in which they are both accused and judge? Overthinking thrives in the gap between reality and imagination. It feeds on uncertainty, on the human craving for absolute control. But here is the paradox: the more you try to predict every outcome, the less prepared you are to live. You forget that life unfolds in the present moment, not in the theater of future scenarios you stage in your mind. The sage archetype, calm, unmoved, sovereign, walks through the same unpredictable world as the rest of us. Yet his mind is not a prisoner. He moves with clarity because he has trained himself to meet life as it comes, rather than as he fears it might be. When you begin to see yourself in that archetype, something shifts. You no longer chase the impossible task of rearranging the universe to suit your anxieties. Instead, you turn inward, fortifying the citadel, mastering the only territory that was ever yours, your own mind. This turning inward is not withdrawal from life, it is the beginning of true engagement. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And you begin to see how much of your life has been lived in those imagined agonies. Each fear was a phantom, each regret, a shadow replaying on the walls of the mind. And yet, these phantoms have dictated your choices, your relationships, even the rhythm of your breath. Psychology calls it cognitive distortion, the Stoics called it misjudgment. Both point to the same truth: your perception is not the world, it is a lens. And the lens can be polished, The work is slow, deliberate. You catch yourself mid-spiral and ask, is this within my control? If yes, you act without hesitation. If no, you release it into the vast expanse of what belongs to fate. Here lies the discipline, to endure uncertainty without letting it dictate your spirit. To meet discomfort without adding the weight of resistance. Overthinking loses its grip not through force, but through clarity. You start to see thoughts for what they are, passing messengers, not commands. In time, the noise quiets. And in that quiet, you rediscover something overthinking had long buried, the stillness in which wisdom speaks. Stillness is not emptiness, it is the fertile ground where strength takes root. In that space, you begin to feel the weight of your own presence, unburdened by the constant push and pull of imagined futures. The mind, once a battlefield, becomes a watchtower. From here, you observe thoughts without being drawn into their skirmishes. They pass like clouds, and you remain the sky. Marcus Aurelius spoke of living in accordance with nature, which means accepting that the world will move as it must. Your role is not to control its tides, but to steer your vessel with skill and composure. Overthinking had made you believe that vigilance meant exhaustion, that only by constant mental labor could you protect yourself from harm. But the truth, illuminated by both Stoic philosophy and the quiet certainty of lived experience, is that protection comes from preparedness, not paranoia. This is where individuation begins. The fragmented self, the anxious child, the relentless planner, the silent judge, slowly merges into a whole. You no longer define yourself by the chaos within. Instead, you align with the sage, the inner figure who stands unshaken as life unfolds. And in that alignment, there is power. A power that does not shout, does not panic, but radiates in calm defiance of fear. You realize then that the war was never against the world, it was against your own surrender. And so, you begin to live differently. Not slower, not faster, but with a kind of deliberate grace that was impossible before. Decisions no longer feel like cliffs you might fall from, they are simply steps on a path, each one taken with awareness. The temptation to spiral into endless what-ifs still arises. But now it meets a gatekeeper, your discernment. The mind asks, is this within my control? If the answer is no, the thought dissolves before it can take root. Modern psychology calls this cognitive reappraisal. The Stoics knew it as the discipline of assent, the power to decide which impressions to accept and which to reject. This is the alchemy of thought, where fear transforms into focus, and worry into action. Relationships change, too. The constant overanalysis of what others think, the hidden need for their validation, these begin to fade. You stand more firmly in your own worth, realizing that external approval was always a fragile currency. Your peace is no longer for sale. In this way, Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a lived art, a way of moving through chaos without letting chaos move through you. And with each day, the mind grows quieter, not because the world has changed, but because you have reclaimed your sovereignty. In this sovereignty, life feels lighter, not because the storms have ceased, but because you no longer try to hold back the rain with your bare hands. You've learned to let the clouds pass without declaring them omens. You've learned that the mind's job is not to predict every wave, but to steer steadily through whatever waters come. There is a kind of rebirth here. The person who once lived in constant rehearsal for disasters that never arrived has given way to someone else, someone anchored, awake, and unafraid. You begin to savor moments without dissecting them. A conversation is no longer replayed for flaws, a plan is no longer drowned in 100 imagined outcomes. You live. And living is enough. The Stoics would call this ataraxia, a state of unshakable tranquility. Modern language might call it inner peace. Whatever the name, it is the end of captivity. You have seen the illusions for what they are, and they cannot command you anymore. And so the chains fall. One by one, you walk forward without the weight of unnecessary fears. without the need to control the uncontrollable. The past loses its claws, and the future its threats. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength.